My daughter called me dead weight right before throwing me out of her mansion. 3 days later, she was at my door sobbing and begging for help. I looked her straight in the eyes and shut the door in her face. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, this story is going to hit hard. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around because you're about to hear how I turned my daughter's betrayal into the most satisfying revenge of my life. Hi, my name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my life was destroyed and how I destroyed them right back. For most of my life, I thought being a good mother meant sacrificing everything. My dreams, my career, even my friends, I gave them all up for my only child, Emily. She was my miracle baby, the only good thing to come out of a toxic marriage with my ex-husband, Mark. When Mark left, Emily and I only had each other. I worked 2 jobs to keep her fed, clothed, and in good schools, always telling myself it would pay off someday. And in a way, it did. Emily grew up beautiful, smart, and ambitious. She was my pride and joy, but as she got older, she started to change. At first, it was subtle, skipping our Sunday breakfasts, spending more time with her wealthy friends, rolling her eyes when I mentioned the sacrifices I'd made. I thought it was just a phase. I couldn't have been more wrong. Everything came crashing down the day her grandmother died. Emily's paternal grandmother, Margaret, was a cold, sharp woman who never liked me. She thought I was good enough for her son or her family's money. I assumed when she passed, everything would go to Mark or maybe be split between them. What I didn't expect was for Emily to be named sole heir to $12 million. When we sat in the lawyer's office and those words were spoken, my heart stopped. Emily gasped, covering her mouth like she couldn't believe it either. Mark smirked like he'd been expecting it. I just sat there. $12 million. It was life-changing money, the kind that could fix every hardship we'd ever endured. For a moment, I thought Emily and I would finally be safe, that maybe she'd use a little of it to help me finally rest after decades of working myself to the bone. But the look she gave me told me everything. It wasn't gratitude, it wasn't love. It was power. That night, we celebrated at a fancy restaurant Mark had suggested, one I could never have afforded on my own. Emily wore a designer dress she must have bought hours after the reading. She clinked glasses with Mark, laughing like they'd been planning this moment forever. I sat across from them, smiling weakly, feeling like an outsider at my own family's table. Then, over dessert, Emily said the words that shattered me. "Mom, now that I have the means to, live my life fully, I think it's time you focused on yours. You've been kind of holding me back." I blinked. "Holding you back, Emily? I've done everything for you." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "I know, and I'm grateful, really, but I don't need you hovering anymore. I'm an adult, and honestly, you don't really fit into the world I'm trying to build." Mark chuckled, adding, "She's just saying it's time for you to enjoy your freedom, maybe travel or move somewhere quiet." My stomach turned to ice. "Move? Are you asking me to leave?" Emily sighed dramatically like I was being unreasonable. "Not asking, telling. I already hired movers. You'll be staying at a small apartment downtown. I covered the first month's rent. Consider it a gift." I stared at her, speechless. A gift, after everything I'd given up for her. When I didn't respond, Emily leaned forward, her voice cold. "Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. This is what's best for both of us." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of strangers boxing up my things. By noon, I was standing on the curb with 2 suitcases, watching Emily's shiny new luxury car pull out of the driveway. She didn't even look back. I thought my heart couldn't break any more than it already had. I was wrong. Because 3 days later, there was a frantic pounding on my door. When I opened it, Emily stood there, mascara smeared, hair wild, clutching her designer purse like a lifeline. "Mom," she sobbed, "you have to help me. They're going to take everything." I froze, my hand still gripping the doorknob as Emily's words echoed in my head. "They're going to take everything." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Just 3 days ago, she had kicked me out of my own home, no, her home now, and left me standing on a dirty sidewalk with nothing but 2 battered suitcases and a lifetime of sacrifices. Now here she was, trembling, makeup streaked, looking like a terrified little girl instead of the confident heiress who'd called me dead weight. "What are you talking about, Emily?" My voice came out flat like a stranger's. She shoved past me into the tiny apartment, slamming the door behind her. The smell of her expensive perfume filled the air, clashing with the stale scent of takeout containers and cleaning supplies. She paced back and forth like a caged animal. "They're going to take it all, Mom," she cried. "The house, the cars, the money, everything Grandma left me. I didn't know there were conditions in the will." My chest tightened. Conditions? What conditions? Emily wrung her hands, her long fake nails clicking together. "There was this clause in Grandma's trust. I didn't read all of it at first, I just saw the money and signed where they told me. But now the lawyer says if I don't meet certain requirements, everything goes to a backup heir." I crossed my arms. A backup heir who? Emily froze. For a split second, guilt flashed across her face, quickly replaced by fear. I don't know," she stammered, avoiding my eyes. "Just someone Grandma named in case I failed to uphold family values, whatever that means." I narrowed my eyes. Margaret was a lot of things: cruel, manipulative, controlling, but she was never vague. If there were conditions, they'd be precise. Emily was lying about something. "Emily," I said slowly, "what exactly do you have to do to keep the inheritance?" She bit her lip, then blurted out, "I have to prove I'm financially responsible. No reckless spending, no excessive debts, and I have to maintain a stable family relationship." She spat the last words like they were poison. My mind started connecting dots. Stable family relationship. Margaret had despised me, but she'd loved the idea of family legacy. If Emily had kicked me out so cruelly, that would definitely count as breaking the stability clause. I let out a humorless laugh. "So let me get this straight. You threw me out, called me useless, told me I was holding you back, and now you need me to play happy family so you don't lose your millions." Emily's eyes welled up again. "Mom, please, I didn't mean it like that. I was just overwhelmed. I didn't know what I was doing. You've always been there for me, and I need you to be there for me now." Her voice cracked, and for a brief, painful moment I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered standing on that curb, watching her drive away without looking back. I turned away from her, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Why come to me? Why not ask your father or one of your rich friends?" Emily's face darkened. "Dad can't help. The will specifically says I have to maintain a relationship with my mother, and my friends, they don't care about me like you do." I nearly laughed out loud at the irony. "Oh, now you care about what I feel." "Mom, please," she dropped to her knees in front of me, clutching my hands. "I'm sorry, I'll do anything, just move back into the house. Pretend everything's fine for a few months, and then when the lawyer signs off, we can go our separate ways. You'll never have to see me again." Her words stung like acid. "Never have to see me again," she said, as if I were some disease she wanted to cut out of her life. I studied her carefully. The desperation in her voice was real, but not because she loved me. It was because she loved the money. Slowly, a dangerous idea began to take shape in my mind. This was my chance. She thought she was manipulating me. But what she didn't realize was that I could play this game better than anyone. I forced my face into a mask of concern. "All right, Emily, I'll move back in, but you have to promise me something." Her eyes lit up. "Anything." "You have to let me handle certain parts of your finances. I'll be the responsible parent figure your lawyer needs to see. It'll make everything look legitimate." She hesitated, then nodded eagerly. Yes, of course, whatever you need." I smiled, though inside my heart was ice. Good, because we need to start immediately. As Emily hugged me tightly, babbling thanks, my mind was already racing. If Margaret's will had a backup heir clause, that meant there was someone else, someone she'd chosen over Emily if things went wrong. And I had a feeling I knew exactly who that someone might be. But first, I needed to play the part of the dutiful mother, smile, nod, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. Because Emily didn't just take my home. She took my trust, my love, my life. And now I was going to take everything back. The next morning, I packed my few belongings and returned to the mansion. It felt surreal walking through those marble doors again, like stepping into a dream that had turned into a nightmare. Emily had already redecorated. Everything was sleek, modern, and soulless, a reflection of her new personality. As we settled into our fake, happy family routine, Emily had no idea that every smile I gave her was a dagger I was sharpening. Because I wasn't just planning to help her keep the money. I was planning to make sure she lost it all. The first few days back in the mansion were excruciating. Every corner of that house reminded me of what I'd lost and of the bitter reality that I was now pretending to be a mother doting on the very person who had betrayed me. Emily treated me like a prop in her performance. "Mom, smile when the lawyer visits," she hissed one morning, grabbing my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. "If you mess this up, we both lose everything." I forced a sweet smile and said, "Don't worry, darling, I know how to play the part." Inside, I seethed, "Both of us lose everything?" "No, Emily, only you will lose everything." The first visit from her lawyer, Mr. Clarkson, was my chance to gather intel. He was a sharp man in his 50s with thin glasses and an even thinner patience for nonsense. As he inspected the house and asked questions about our relationship, I played the perfect mother, concerned, loving, a bit naive. Emily sat beside me, holding my hand, her face a mask of forced affection. At one point, Mr. Clarkson asked, "Sarah, have you been involved in Emily's financial decisions since the inheritance transfer?" Emily jumped in quickly. "Of course she has. Mom's been helping me budget and plan for the future." I gave a modest nod. "I just want to make sure Emily doesn't get overwhelmed. It's a lot of money for someone so young." Mr. Clarkson studied me carefully. "That's good to hear." Margaret's exact words in her will were, "Emily must demonstrate both fiscal responsibility and strong family ties. If either is compromised, the inheritance automatically transfers to the secondary heir." There it was, confirmation. "Secondary heir?" I asked casually, though my pulse raced. Clarkson glanced at Emily before replying, "It's confidential, but yes." Margaret wanted to ensure her legacy went to someone she trusted. I caught the slight flicker of panic in Emily's eyes. She knew who it was, even if she hadn't told me. After Clarkson left, I confronted her. "Who's the backup heir, Emily? You've been hiding something from me." She spun around, anger flashing across her face. "It doesn't matter, you just focus on playing the perfect mom and I'll handle the rest." "No, Emily, if I'm risking my time and reputation for you, I deserve to know who we're dealing with." She hesitated, then muttered, "It's Aunt Linda, Grandma's sister. She hated me, Mom, always said I was spoiled. She's just waiting for me to screw up so she can take the money." Aunt Linda, that bitter, sharp-tongued woman who'd always looked down on me for not being classy enough. I hadn't seen her in years, but I remembered her venomous words clearly. "Good," I said, surprising Emily. Her brow furrowed. "Good, how is that good?" "Because now I know exactly where to strike," I murmured. From that moment, my plan began to take shape. Emily thought I was here to save her, but I was here to destroy her, and to make sure Aunt Linda never saw a cent of Margaret's fortune either. Emily had been reckless with her spending, but I needed proof, concrete evidence that she was violating the fiscal responsibility clause. I started going through receipts, credit card statements, and bank transfers. What I found was worse than I imagined. She wasn't just buying luxury cars and designer clothes. She was funneling money into a shady business venture with her father, Mark. They opened an exclusive nightclub downtown using Margaret's money as the seed fund. The expenses were astronomical: liquor, illegal permits, bribes to city officials. If Clarkson saw these transactions, Emily wouldn't just lose the inheritance, she could face fraud charges. I printed everything and kept it hidden in a folder at the bottom of my suitcase. The second step was manipulation. Every day, I played the loving, supportive mother while subtly feeding Emily's ego. "You're so smart with business decisions," I'd say, watching her beam. "Grandma would be so proud of how independent you've become," I'd add, even as my stomach churned. The more she trusted me, the sloppier she became. She'd leave documents out in the open, have heated phone calls with Mark in front of me, even brag about how she'd tricked Clarkson during his last visit. But the most important moment came 2 weeks later when Aunt Linda herself showed up at the house. The doorbell rang while Emily was out shopping. When I opened the door, there she stood, tall, severe, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. "Sarah," she said coolly, "I suppose you know why I'm here." I smiled politely. "Come in, Linda. Emily isn't home, but I'd love to catch up." As we sat in the living room, Linda didn't waste time. Emily is a disaster waiting to happen. Margaret was a fool to leave her that much money. I'm here to warn you, if she slips up, I will take control of the estate immediately. Her tone was smug, condescending, and exactly what I needed to hear. I feigned concern. I just want what's best for Emily. She's young and this is all so overwhelming for her. Linda snorted. Overwhelming? She's reckless. Mark is bleeding her dry. I have eyes everywhere, Sarah. The moment she crosses a line, I'll be ready. I tilted my head thoughtfully. You know, Linda, maybe we should work together. If Emily really is unfit, wouldn't it be better to transition the money smoothly without scandal? Linda's eyes gleamed with greed. I'm listening. Inside, I nearly laughed. She had no idea she'd just stepped into my trap. That night, Emily came home in a flurry of shopping bags and drama. Mom, you'll never guess who I saw today, that vulture Aunt Linda. She's trying to take everything from me. I pretended to be shocked. Oh no, did she say anything specific? No, but I know she's plotting something. We have to be careful. I hugged her tightly, whispering, don't worry, sweetheart, I'll protect you. But as I held her, my eyes were cold. Because I wasn't protecting her. I was setting her up for the fall of a lifetime. Over the next week, I carefully orchestrated my plan. I fed Linda small bits of real information about Emily's reckless spending, just enough to make her salivate. Meanwhile, I guided Emily into making bigger, bolder financial moves with Mark, convincing her that showing confidence would impress Clarkson. Neither of them realized they were walking straight into my trap. The final step was timing. Clarkson's next inspection was scheduled for Friday. By Thursday night, I had all the evidence ready: receipts, bank statements, and even a recording of Emily screaming at me, a perfect example of her unstable family relationship. As I sealed the envelope, my hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. Tomorrow, Emily's world would burn. Friday morning dawned bright and deceptively peaceful. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows of the mansion, glinting off the crystal vases and polished marble floors. It was the kind of day that should have been filled with laughter and family breakfasts, the life I'd once dreamed of giving Emily. But instead, my heart beat like a war drum. Today was Judgment Day. Emily twirled in front of a mirror, admiring her new diamond earrings. She'd spent nearly $20,000 on them the day before. She caught my reflection in the mirror and smirked. Mom, do I look powerful enough to convince Clarkson I've got everything under control? I forced a warm smile. You look like a queen, Emily. He won't suspect a thing. Inside, I nearly choked on my own words. Oh, he'll suspect something, all right, just not what you think. Mark was already at the house when Clarkson arrived. Emily insisted he be present as her business partner, claiming it would make her appear more stable. The irony of her needing Mark, the same man who had abandoned us years ago, wasn't lost on me. He greeted me with his usual smirk, the one that used to make my blood boil. Well, Sarah, he drawled, looks like you're finally living the good life again. Maybe you should thank Emily for kicking you out, gave you some perspective. I gave him a tight-lipped smile. Oh, I'll be thanking Emily very soon. When Clarkson walked in, he looked more serious than ever. He carried a leather briefcase and a thick folder of documents. Good morning, he said curtly, shaking hands with each of us. Let's get started. Today is an important review. Emily launched into her performance immediately. Mr. Clarkson, I've been managing my finances carefully. Mom's been helping me plan everything, and Dad and I are working on an exciting business venture that Grandma would have loved. Clarkson raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what kind of venture is this? Emily beamed. A luxury nightclub downtown. It's exclusive, high-end, very profitable. I nearly laughed at her stupidity. Clarkson's face, however, remained stoic. Interesting, he said, jotting down notes. And you've been tracking expenses closely, I assume. Of course, Emily chirped. Every penny is accounted for. Mark nodded in agreement, though sweat glistened on his forehead. We moved to the formal dining room where Emily had set up binders of fake financial plans. While she bragged about her future empire, I quietly slipped the sealed envelope I'd prepared into Clarkson's briefcase when no one was looking. Inside that envelope was everything. Bank statements proving Emily's reckless spending. Receipts from illegal transactions tied to the club. A detailed list of bribes paid to city officials, complete with dates and amounts. And finally, a USB drive containing a recording of Emily screaming at me 3 nights earlier. On the recording, her voice dripped with venom. "Mom, you're nothing but a pawn. When this is over, I'll kick you out again and you'll never see me or a dime of this money." Perfect evidence of a broken family relationship. As Clarkson reviewed the binders, his brow furrowed deeper and deeper. Emily's confident smile began to falter. Is something wrong?" she asked nervously. Clarkson closed the binder with a snap. "Emily, I need to speak with you privately." Mark protested, but Clarkson silenced him with a sharp glance. "This concerns the inheritance conditions. Sarah, Mark, please step outside." Emily looked at me with wide, terrified eyes as I patted her shoulder. "Don't worry, honey, I'm sure it's just routine." The moment the door closed behind me, my pulse quickened. I couldn't hear the exact words, but Emily's shrill voice carried through the walls. "What do you mean I'm in violation? This is ridiculous." Clarkson's calmer, firmer tone responded, but I couldn't make out his words. Then Emily screamed again, this time even louder. "No, you can't take it away from me. This is my money." I leaned against the hallway wall, savoring every syllable like the sweetest dessert. After nearly 30 agonizing minutes, the door finally opened. Clarkson emerged, his expression grim. Emily followed, her face pale and blotchy from crying. "I've completed my assessment," Clarkson announced. "Emily has failed to meet the conditions outlined in Margaret's will. Effective immediately, the inheritance will be transferred to the secondary heir." Emily collapsed into a chair, sobbing hysterically. No, 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 please, Mr. Clarkson, I can fix this. I'll do better, I promise." Clarkson shook his head. "The violations are severe and well documented. There is no appeal process." Mark exploded. "Who's the backup heir? Tell us." Clarkson adjusted his glasses. "The new beneficiary is Sarah." The room went silent. Emily froze mid-sob, staring at me with wide, uncomprehending eyes. What?" she whispered. Mark turned bright red, veins bulging in his neck. "You've got to be kidding me, her." I stepped forward calmly, my voice steady and cold. "Margaret always said she valued family loyalty. I guess she finally realized who was truly loyal." Emily stumbled to her feet, shaking her head violently. "No, this isn't fair, Mom, you can't do this to me." I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent shivers down her spine. "Oh, Emily, I didn't do this to you, you did this to yourself." Mark grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "You planned this, you set her up." I yanked my arm free, glaring at him. "After everything you did to me, to us, you don't get to play the victim. You taught Emily to lie and cheat, now you can both reap the rewards." Clarkson cleared his throat. "Sarah, you'll need to sign a few documents to finalize the transfer. Emily, Mark, I suggest you vacate the premises immediately." Emily let out a guttural scream, knocking over a vase as she lunged at me. "You're evil, you ruined my life." I didn't flinch. "No, Emily, I saved my own life." As Clarkson escorted them out, Emily kept screaming my name, her voice echoing through the grand hallways. The moment the door slammed shut, silence fell over the mansion. For the first time in years, I felt free. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. Because Emily still had Mark and their illegal club. And I wasn't about to let them escape unscathed. The silence after Emily and Mark were escorted out was deafening. It wasn't peaceful, though. It was charged, electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. I stood alone in the middle of the grand foyer, staring at the door they had just slammed behind them. For years, I had been invisible in this house, just Mom, the woman who cooked, cleaned, sacrificed. Now, for the first time, it was mine. But I didn't allow myself to celebrate yet. Emily and Mark weren't just going to crawl away quietly. They were cornered animals now, desperate, dangerous, and vengeful. I knew exactly how people like them thought because I had spent my entire life cleaning up their messes. They would regroup, plot, and strike back, and their weapon wasn't just anger, it was that shady nightclub. If I wanted true closure, I couldn't just take the inheritance. I had to burn down their entire empire. That evening, Clarkson returned to finalize the legal paperwork. He was surprisingly warm now, almost deferential. "Sarah," he said, sliding the documents across the table, "Margaret spoke highly of you in her final notes. She wanted you to have security after all you've endured." I signed my name with steady hands. "Margaret and I didn't always get along," I said truthfully, "but I understand now she was protecting the family from itself." Clarkson nodded gravely. "I'll also warn you, Emily and Mark may try to challenge this in court, but with the evidence we've documented, they don't have a case." I smiled thinly. "Oh, I'm counting on them to try. The more noise they make, the easier it'll be for me to expose them." He raised an eyebrow. "Expose them?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Mr. Clarkson, you've seen the illegal transactions tied to their nightclub. That place isn't just a business venture, it's a criminal operation. If they think they can run it under my radar, they're wrong." Clarkson looked uneasy but said nothing. The next morning, I dressed in plain clothes and drove to the address I'd found on Emily's receipts. The building was tucked away in a grimy part of town, a sharp contrast to the luxury Emily flaunted. From the outside, it didn't look like much, just a blacked-out storefront with a velvet rope and two massive bouncers. But the line of sleek cars parked nearby told me everything I needed to know. This was a playground for the rich and reckless. I parked across the street and watched for an hour, taking notes. People slipped in and out, always after a whispered exchange with the doorman. A few men in suits carried heavy briefcases inside. Drugs, bribes, money laundering. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. As I watched, a familiar figure appeared, Mark. He strode out the door, laughing with a city inspector I recognized from a local news segment. My stomach twisted with rage. So that's how they've been getting away with it. Mark's paying off city officials to keep the place open. I snapped photos from my car, heart pounding. Evidence was stacking up nicely. But photos wouldn't be enough. I needed someone on the inside. Back at the mansion, I racked my brain for anyone who might have a grudge against Emily and Mark. That's when I remembered Tyler, one of Emily's ex-boyfriends. Tyler had been genuinely kind when he dated Emily years ago, but she dumped him brutally when she met wealthier friends. I'd run into him once after the breakup and he'd told me quietly, she'll get what's coming to her someday. I found his number in an old phone book and dialed. "Tyler," I said when he answered, "this is Sarah, Emily's mother." There was a pause, then a cautious, "Mrs. Jennings, oh, why are you calling me?" I explained everything carefully, strategically. I didn't lie, but I made sure to emphasize Emily's cruelty and Mark's corruption. By the end, Tyler's voice was tight with anger. "After what they did to me, to you, yeah, I'll help. I actually know a guy who works security at that club. He hates Mark's guts. He can get us insider info." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. "Tyler, you have no idea how much this means to me." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This could get dangerous." 2 nights later, I met Tyler and his friend, Jason, in a deserted parking lot. Jason was wiry and jittery, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "That club's rotten to the core," Jason muttered. "I've seen everything: drugs, illegal gambling, even trafficking. Mark runs the books himself to keep it off the radar." I handed him an envelope stuffed with cash. "Get me proof, documents, recordings, anything that links Mark and Emily to these crimes." Jason nodded, tucking the envelope into his jacket. "Give me 3 days." While we waited, I played my role perfectly at the mansion. Emily called me constantly, her voice oscillating between rage and desperation. "You stole everything from me, Mom. How could you do this?" And then minutes later, "Please, just please give it back. I'll be better. I'll do whatever you want." Each time I responded with the same calm, icy tone. "You made your choice, Emily. Live with it." But one evening, she said something that made my blood run cold. "If I can't have it, no one can." The line went dead. For the first time, I felt genuine fear. Emily wasn't just reckless, she was dangerous. 3 days later, Jason returned with a thick folder and a flash drive. "This is everything," he said, hands trembling. Bank records, surveillance footage, even recordings of Mark discussing bribes with city officials, it's enough to bury them both. I flipped through the folder, my hands shaking with adrenaline. It was worse than I'd imagined. Cash transactions tied to organized crime. Names of politicians on their payroll. A hidden ledger proving Emily had been signing off on illegal activities. Tyler whistled low. Holy hell, this isn't just a takedown, this is a nuke. I smiled darkly. Exactly. The timing had to be perfect. If I exposed them too early, Emily might escape. Too late, and they might destroy evidence or retaliate violently. Clarkson was holding a charity gala at the mansion the following weekend. All of Margaret's old friends, the city's elite, and half the local media would be there. It was the perfect stage. I would reveal everything publicly, in front of the very people Emily wanted to impress. And when the dust settled, not only would Emily and Mark lose their empire, they'd lose their freedom. As I locked the folder in my safe, my hands trembled with anticipation. The next time Emily saw me, she wouldn't just see her mother. She'd see her executioner. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. My body was exhausted, but my mind raced with every possible outcome. I sat at the window in Margaret's old study, staring out over the darkened estate. Tomorrow would either end with Emily and Mark destroyed, or with me utterly ruined. The stakes couldn't be higher. Tyler had checked in earlier that evening, assuring me Jason's evidence was secure. Clarkson had been notified of my intention to make a public announcement, though he didn't know the full extent of what I planned to reveal. I hadn't told him everything. I couldn't risk him warning Emily or Mark. Even though Clarkson had always been loyal to Margaret, I'd learned the hard way never to fully trust anyone in this family's circle. As the clock crept toward midnight, I replayed every betrayal in my mind, every dismissive comment, every moment Emily chose Mark over me, every time I was made to feel small and irrelevant. By dawn, my fear had hardened into resolve. There would be no turning back. The mansion buzzed with activity as the gala preparations began. Staff scurried about, arranging extravagant floral displays and setting gleaming silverware on long banquet tables. I dressed carefully in one of Margaret's old evening gowns, deep emerald silk that shimmered in the light. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the timid, overlooked mother Emily had mocked. In her place stood someone powerful, dangerous, and unbreakable. Guests began to arrive just after sunset. The driveway filled with luxury cars, the air with polite laughter and clinking glasses. From my position at the top of the grand staircase, I scanned the crowd like a general surveying a battlefield. The city's elite were all here, politicians, business magnates, even a few high-ranking law enforcement officials. Exactly as planned. Then I saw them. Emily and Mark swept in like royalty, perfectly dressed and perfectly false. Emily wore a glittering silver gown, her smile wide but strained. Mark held her hand, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh, though the sound was brittle, hollow. Our eyes met across the room. For a split second, Emily's mask slipped. Hatred blazed in her gaze, pure and unfiltered. Good, I thought coldly, let her hate me, it will make her downfall that much sweeter. As the evening progressed, Emily worked the crowd tirelessly, her laugh growing louder with each glass of champagne. She was trying to project control, to convince everyone she still reigned supreme. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. I overheard snippets of conversation as I mingled with guests. Did you hear about the will change? Something about shady finances. I always wondered about that club of theirs, seems suspicious. Emily noticed too. Her movements grew sharper, more frantic, as she tried to squash the rumors. Mark, meanwhile, stuck close to the bar, his face flushed and his speech growing slurred. They were unraveling, and I hadn't even made my move yet. Finally, Clarkson tapped a spoon against his glass, signaling for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, thank you for joining us tonight to honor Margaret Jennings' legacy. Polite applause filled the room. Emily stepped forward, ready to take control of the spotlight. But before she could speak, I moved to the center of the room. Actually, I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong, I have something important to share first. Emily froze. Her smile faltered, then returned brittle and forced. Mother, she said sweetly, perhaps we should discuss this later. No, I cut her off sharply, we'll discuss it now in front of everyone. A ripple of unease swept through the crowd. Clarkson looked confused but didn't intervene. All eyes were on me, exactly as I'd planned. I drew a deep breath and began. Many of you know me as Margaret's daughter-in-law, I said, my voice steady. You've likely heard Emily and Mark's version of events, that they were poised to inherit Margaret's estate and carry on the Jennings legacy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Emily's smile grew strained. Well, I continued, that's not the whole story. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder Jason had given me. This, I said, holding it up, is the truth. Gasps filled the room. Emily took a step forward, her face pale. Mother, don't. But I was already opening the folder. Inside are records proving that Emily and Mark have been running an illegal operation through their nightclub, money laundering, drug trafficking, even bribery of public officials. The crowd erupted into shocked whispers. Several people turned to stare at Mark, whose face was now a mottled shade of red. You're lying, Emily screamed, her composure shattering. She's lying, this is just some twisted revenge fantasy because I told her to leave. I ignored her and pressed on. These documents include bank records, surveillance footage, and even audio recordings of Mark discussing payoffs with city inspectors. I played one of the recordings on a small speaker. Mark's voice filled the room. Make sure the fire marshal looks the other way. Here's another 50 grand. The room fell silent. Then chaos erupted. Reporters scrambled to record everything. Several guests immediately distanced themselves from Emily and Mark, muttering about damage control. Clarkson's face was pale with shock, but he nodded slowly at me, a silent acknowledgement of victory. Emily, however, was far from done. She lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage. You stupid, ungrateful witch, do you have any idea what you've done? 2 security guards intercepted her, holding her back as she screamed and thrashed. Mark stumbled forward, clearly intoxicated. This is all fake, we'll sue you for slander, we'll. Good luck with that, I said coldly, the police are on their way. Right on cue, sirens wailed outside. The front doors burst open and a team of officers stormed in. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as they moved straight toward Emily and Mark. Emily Jennings, Mark Caldwell, the lead officer, announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. Emily's screams turned to desperate pleas. No, you don't understand, I'm the victim here. Mark tried to bolt, but 2 officers tackled him to the ground. The sight of them being handcuffed and dragged out of the mansion was more satisfying than I'd ever imagined. But the best part, as they passed me, Emily locked eyes with me, her face streaked with mascara. This isn't over, she hissed. I leaned down, smiling coldly. Oh, it's over, you just don't know it yet. As the police escorted them outside, the crowd erupted into a frenzy of chatter. Some guests hurriedly left, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Others stayed, whispering furiously about what they'd just witnessed. Clarkson approached me, his expression a mixture of awe and wariness. Sarah, that was extraordinary. I smiled faintly. Thank you, Mr. Clarkson, but this was never about spectacle, it was about justice. He nodded slowly, clearly unsure whether to admire me or fear me. As the last guests departed, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Emily and Mark were gone. Their empire was crumbling. But I knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. Because Emily's final words echoed in my mind, this isn't over. And deep down, I knew she was dangerous enough to mean it. The mansion was eerily quiet once the last guest left. The echo of the night's chaos lingered in the air like the remnants of a storm. I stood alone in the ballroom, staring at the shattered pieces of a champagne flute on the marble floor. Emily and Mark were gone, in custody, awaiting charges that would keep them locked away for decades. But my heart refused to rest. Emily's last words clawed at me, this isn't over. I knew my daughter better than anyone. Emily didn't just make threats, she acted on them, and if she couldn't control me through charm or intimidation, she'd try something darker. I wasn't afraid for myself anymore. But Tyler, Jason, and even Clarkson, they'd risked everything to help me. If Emily decided to retaliate, she wouldn't care who got hurt in the process. So I decided to strike first, one final blow to ensure she could never hurt anyone again. The morning news was a spectacle. Every channel replayed the footage of Emily and Mark being dragged out of the gala in handcuffs. Headlines screamed, "Heiress and partner arrested in massive criminal scandal. Jennings family empire crumbles overnight. Secret nightclub tied to drug trafficking and bribery." Calls poured in all day, reporters, old acquaintances, even distant relatives who had once ignored me. But I ignored them all. Instead, I spent the morning going through Jason's folder again, looking for anything we'd missed. That's when I found it. A single sheet of paper tucked between the ledgers, a list of offshore accounts. Some of the names were Mark's aliases, but 2 accounts were in Emily's name alone. Each held millions of dollars, completely separate from the inheritance. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Even as she begged for the Jennings fortune, Emily had her own secret stash. She never needed the inheritance, she just wanted to take it from me. Later that afternoon, Tyler called. His voice was tight with panic. "Sarah, you need to hear this. Jason overheard something last night before the police raid." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" Emily had a backup plan. She told Mark that if everything went south, she had insurance. Some kind of fail-safe that would protect her even if they were caught. I froze. "What kind of insurance?" She didn't say, but Jason swears she mentioned your name, like she planned to use you as leverage somehow. Ice flooded my veins. Emily wasn't just dangerous, she was meticulous. If she had evidence or leverage against me, I needed to find it before her lawyers did. I returned to the mansion's study and began searching every inch of Emily's old suite. Hours passed. Drawers emptied, closets gutted, walls tapped for hidden compartments. Nothing. Frustration gnawed at me until I remembered something Margaret had once told me about her late husband. Harold loved puzzles. He even built a hidden safe room in this house, said it was for emergencies. My pulse quickened. If Emily knew about it, she would have used it to hide whatever insurance she had. I combed through Margaret's journals, finally finding a cryptic note: "The heart of the family lies beneath the library." The library. Of course. I rushed there, scanning the room. The fireplace mantel was carved with a large Jennings family crest, a heart surrounded by vines. I pressed against the heart. With a soft click, a panel slid open, revealing a narrow passageway leading down. Inside the hidden room was a single steel safe. My hands trembled as I entered the date of Emily's birth, my first guess. The lock clicked open. Inside was a manila folder labeled contingency. I flipped it open and felt my blood run cold. Photos, documents, video footage. All meticulously compiled to paint me as the mastermind behind the club's crimes. If this evidence were ever released, it would look like I'd framed Emily and Mark to steal the inheritance. My knees nearly buckled. Emily hadn't just been planning for herself, she'd been preparing to destroy me completely. Beneath the folder sat a flash drive. I plugged it into a small portable viewer I'd brought with me. On the screen, Emily appeared, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're seeing this, it means my mother betrayed me. She wanted my life, my legacy. She forced me into these crimes, manipulated Mark, and now she's trying to take it all. Don't believe her lies." Her voice was steady, convincing. Almost believable enough to fool anyone who didn't know the threat. I stared at the screen, fury rising like fire in my chest. Emily hadn't just betrayed me, she'd prepared to rewrite history. If this ever reached the public, my victory would be undone in an instant. But Emily had made one critical mistake. In one of the videos, she casually mentioned dates and locations that didn't match the known timeline of the club's illegal operations. It wasn't just a lie, it was sloppy. If I could expose those inconsistencies before her lawyers discovered the footage, I could destroy her credibility permanently. I called Clarkson immediately. "Clarkson, I need you to arrange a press conference tomorrow morning," I said, my voice sharp with determination. "Bring the media, bring law enforcement, and bring Emily's lawyer too." He hesitated. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" The gala was explosive enough. Another public spectacle could. "This isn't about spectacle," I cut in. "It's about ending this once and for all." The next morning, the mansion was swarming with reporters again. Cameras flashed as Clarkson addressed the crowd, giving a brief summary of the charges against Emily and Mark. Then he stepped aside and I took the podium. "Thank you all for coming," I began. My voice was calm, measured, the voice of someone with nothing to hide. "Last night my daughter attempted to frame me as the architect of her crimes. Today I will prove to you all that she is lying." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, smirked from the front row. He clearly thought I was bluffing. I held up the flash drive. "This," I said, "contains footage Emily prepared to release if she was ever caught. Footage designed to make me look guilty." The lawyer scoffed. "And how do we know you didn't fabricate that yourself?" I smiled coldly, "Because Emily made mistakes." I played the video on a large screen behind me, freezing it on a frame where Emily mentioned a specific date. "This date," I said, "was 2 weeks after Mark was already in police custody, a date when the club had already been shut down. Her timeline is impossible because she was lying." The crowd erupted. Even Emily's lawyer looked shaken. As the press conference continued, I revealed the rest of Emily's insurance folder. Every false document. Every doctored photo. Every piece of fabricated evidence she'd created to destroy me. By the time I was done, Emily's carefully constructed narrative lay in ruins. The lawyer looked pale and defeated. Without a word, he gathered his papers and left the room. The reporters swarmed me with questions, but I only gave one final statement. "Evil doesn't just destroy families, it tries to rewrite the truth. Today we've stopped that from happening." As the crowd dispersed, Clarkson approached me. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "Emily's been moved to solitary confinement. She tried to hurt herself last night." I paused, stunned. Despite everything she'd done, a flicker of maternal instinct stirred inside me. But then I remembered the videos, the lies, the cruelty, the utter lack of remorse. "She made her choices," I said finally. "Now she lives with them." Still, a strange heaviness settled over me as I returned to the empty mansion. Emily was gone, her empire shattered. But victory didn't feel as sweet as I'd imagined. Because in the end, I hadn't just destroyed my daughter. I destroyed a part of myself too. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the sun set over the estate. The storm had passed. Or so I thought. As I sipped my wine, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was a single photo, a picture of me standing at the podium during the press conference. Beneath it, a single sentence. "You think this is over, it's just beginning." My blood turned to ice. Emily might have been locked away, but someone else, someone powerful, was still out there. And they wanted revenge. I stared at the photo on my phone, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself breathe. The photo wasn't just a threat, it was proof that someone had been watching me closely, even inside the mansion where I thought I was safe. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in around me. I locked the doors, pulled the curtains shut, and sat in the dark, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Emily was behind bars. Mark was awaiting trial. So who could have sent this? Then it hit me. Mark's connections. The politicians and officials he'd been paying off to keep the club operational. If Emily and Mark went down, those people would lose everything, and they wouldn't hesitate to silence me to protect themselves. "This isn't over," Emily had said. Maybe she'd been right. The next morning, I drove to Tyler's apartment. He opened the door looking groggy, but his expression sharpened when he saw my face. "Sarah, what happened? You look like you haven't slept in days." I handed him my phone, showing him the message. His jaw tightened. Damn, this is serious. Whoever sent this has resources. That's not some random threat, that's surveillance-level precision. I paced the room, my hands trembling. If they're watching me, they're probably watching you and Jason too. We need to assume we're all targets now. Tyler frowned. So what's the plan? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stared out the window, watching the city bustle below. Emily and Mark are just pawns. The real enemy is the network that allowed them to thrive. If we don't cut it off at the root, they'll keep coming. Jason, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke up. I've got contacts inside the club's supplier chain. If we follow the money, we can trace it back to whoever's really in charge. I turned to him sharply. Do it tonight. Jason worked fast. By nightfall, he delivered a map of the entire network, names, locations, shell companies. At the top of the list was a name I didn't expect, Clarkson. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Clarkson, the lawyer, that's impossible. But Jason shook his head grimly. It's not. He's been playing both sides all along. He used you to take down Emily and Mark so he could consolidate power. Tyler swore under his breath. This bastard's been 2 steps ahead of us the whole time. I sank into a chair, my mind racing. It made sickening sense. Clarkson had access to every document, every legal move. He'd orchestrated the gala, knowing it would set Emily and Mark up for a public fall. And the message on my phone. That had been his warning, a reminder that he held the final card. The following evening, Clarkson invited me to his private office downtown under the guise of finalizing paperwork. I went alone. The office was sleek and cold, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Clarkson greeted me with a warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah, my dear, congratulations are in order. You've handled yourself magnificently. I forced a polite smile. I appreciate that, Clarkson, truly, but I've been doing some digging of my own. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze, a flash of wariness. Oh, and what have you found? I reached into my bag and pulled out Jason's map, sliding it across his desk. Your name is at the top. For a heartbeat, silence hung between us. Then Clarkson laughed softly. You really are smarter than I gave you credit for. The laughter vanished as quickly as it came. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. But intelligence can be inconvenient. Clarkson leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. You have 2 choices, Sarah. Walk away now with your fortune intact, and I'll ensure no harm comes to you or your friends. He paused, his smile sharp as glass. Or refuse me and you'll join Emily in a very dark place, permanently. I stared at him, my pulse racing. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But then I remembered Emily's face when she realized she'd lost. The years of humiliation, the sacrifices I'd made for a daughter who never loved me. And most of all, the innocent people Emily and Mark had hurt through their crimes, people Clarkson had enabled. I met his gaze steadily. You've underestimated me, Clarkson. Everyone always has, but not anymore. I pulled out my phone and pressed a button. Clarkson's office filled with the sound of his own voice, recorded just moments earlier, threatening me. His eyes widened. What, how? Jason's voice came from the doorway. Smile for the camera, counselor. He stepped inside, holding a small camera rig. Tyler followed, his phone streaming the entire confrontation live to multiple media outlets. You planned this, Clarkson snarled, rising from his chair. I smiled coldly. Of course. Did you really think I'd come here alone, unprepared? I learned from the best from watching Emily and Mark play their games, but unlike them, I play to win. Clarkson lunged for me, but Tyler tackled him to the ground. Police sirens wailed outside as the building swarmed with law enforcement. Moments later, officers stormed in, dragging Clarkson away in handcuffs. The look on his face as he realized he'd been outplayed was one I would cherish forever. In the weeks that followed, the entire network unraveled. Politicians resigned in disgrace. Officials were arrested. The nightclub was permanently shut down, its assets seized. Emily and Mark remained in prison, their empire reduced to rubble. Even from her cell, Emily sent me letters, some begging for forgiveness, others filled with venom. I never responded. One day maybe I'd visit her. But not yet. The wounds were too deep. As the dust settled, I stood alone in the mansion's garden, watching the sun rise over the sprawling estate. For the first time, the air felt clean. I thought about Margaret, about how she tried to warn me, to prepare me for the storm ahead. And I thought about Emily, my daughter, who'd chosen greed over love. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting even, I murmured to the empty air. It's about protecting what's left and letting go of what never truly was. I turned and walked back toward the house, ready to start over. This time on my own terms. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell me in the comments about the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction.